What if I told you that it was possible to drastically speed up your path to financial freedom by following one simple formula? What if I said that with this formula, you can make more money by working less so you can free up more time to focus on your passion, your health, eating cheeseburgers, spending time with your family, you know, the important stuff. And trust me, this formula goes way beyond the surface level basics of finance, where they teach you to just earn more, save more, and invest more. And sure, that's simple, but just because it's simple doesn't mean it's easy. One of the most challenging aspects of personal finance is having the motivation and the willpower to stick with it. And I'm sure you felt this way before. Boy, am I pumped to save some money. I'm gonna be rich one day.
2 weeks later.
Well, you only live once, right? What's the harm in getting another one? Motivation is easy to get at first, but it's really hard to maintain for prolonged periods of time. Not because you don't want the results, but because it's just hard. And I'm sure you'll agree it's even harder to keep doing something that's good for you when it takes away things that you enjoy, like getting a nice coffee once in a while. So that's why, with this simple formula, I'll prove to you that getting a $5 iced coffee at Starbucks is totally fine. You don't have to deprive yourself of simple pleasures, which should make striving for financial freedom just a tiny bit easier. Trust me. This formula was discovered all the way back in 1906 in Italy by an economist called Vilfredo Pareto. One day, Vilfredo was working in his garden, tending to his pea plants, and he made a very interesting discovery that would forever change the world. He found out by analyzing the heat index of the sun in combination with the fundamental velocity of the wind and direction of plant growth that he wasn't a very good gardener. But also, he noticed that about 80% of the healthy pea pods came from 20% of his pea plants. He then went back to his studies to focus on his fancy schmancy economics work, where he was casually researching the wealth of nations. And he noticed something very similar. In Italy, he saw that 80% of the land was owned by 20% of the population. In England, 70% of the total income was earned by only 30% of the people. And everywhere he looked, he was noticing this phenomenon, and he became obsessed with this newfound idea, this ratio. And he discovered that for many things, 80% of the results come from just 20% of the efforts. And he dubbed this formula the Pareto principle. Nowadays, people call it the law of the vital few, the principle of factor sparsity, or the 80-20 formula. What's really cool about this formula is that it expands beyond just gardening or pure economic data. It can be applied to things from massive corporations to our individual lives. Microsoft found that 20% of its software bugs cause 80% of the errors, or even something that you can confirm right now. Take out your smartphone. Well, unless you're watching this on it right now, I'm sure you have like 50 apps downloaded, but I bet you that you only use around 10 of them on a regular basis, right? And I know this not because of the Pareto principle, but because Mr. Magic Lamp over there just told me. So if you're a real one, comment below Mr. Magic Lamp. But before I share how you can use this formula to transform your wealth, expose the secrets of the rich and successful, and prove why you can keep buying iced coffee, keep in mind that it doesn't have to be this exact 80-20 ratio number. It could be 60-40, 90-10, it doesn't matter. The key message is that a majority of the results are almost always caused by a few inputs. Take this YouTube video, for example. Yep, the one you're watching right now. Studies show that participation in online communities follow a version of the Pareto principle, and they call it the 90-9-1 ratio, which simply states that the people watching this video right now, you, that's right, I'm talking about you, 90% of you will just watch the video. 9% of you will interact with it in a small way, maybe by hitting the like button. And 1% will actively interact with it in a big way, like leaving a comment and following me on Instagram. So if you're the 90% who's just passively watching all the time, now's your chance to join the 1% club by gently touching the like button and follow me on Instagram for weekly personal finance tips. Oh, and you'll see a super cute dog once in a while. Now, there are 2 ways to use the Pareto principle to help you reach financial freedom faster. Firstly, the whole idea of this is to help you achieve more by doing less. And this directly relates to your income, whether you're working for someone else, or if you're working on side hustles, or even running your own entire business. If you currently work for someone else right now and you want to start exploring additional income streams like side hustles so you can start making more money, but you realize that you don't have time because you're busy, here's one way to change your entire life, simply by applying the 80-20 formula to the things that you spend time on throughout the day and the results of those things. According to this, nearly 80% of your day is spent on tasks that do nothing to help you reach your goal of financial freedom, whether that's watching TikTok on the toilet, watching Netflix on your bed, or staring at a wall. But don't fret. Here's what you need to do that will immediately help. Number 1, create a list of all the tasks that you do in a day. Number 2, categorize them into tasks that help you achieve either a short-term or a long-term goal. And number 3, if you can't categorize them, then cross them out. Do this for a few days, and then you'll start to see which activities you should probably spend less time on or completely cut out. And once you do, then you should have more time to start activities that actually help you reach financial freedom. But let's say that you've already started a business or you started a side hustle already. You can also use the Pareto principle here, whether you sell a product or a service or whatever. Let's say, for example, if you have 5 customers or if you sell 5 products, you may feel like you need to treat each one all equally with tender love and affection. But the truth is, you don't. Look into your data. Chances are about 80% of your sales come from around 20% of your customers or products. So instead of spreading yourself too thin, you need to focus your time and your money on the 20% to increase your revenue and save your time to work on other things. Maybe starting other side hustles or selling other products or services. Or even on the flip side, if 80% of your customer complaints or questions come from just 20% of your customers, think about it. Could it be worth it to cut them off so you can focus your time and your energy elsewhere? Now, before you close this video because you think you're done and you're on your way to financial freedom, remember, income is only half the equation to wealth. The second half is your expenses. And here's where I can prove that you can still buy your iced coffee whenever you want, within reason, of course. Now, since I don't know how much you're spending exactly year to year, Mr. Magic Lamp didn't tell me, we'll take the average household spending in 2019, which was around $63,000. And this includes stuff like housing, transportation, food, insurance, etc. And we can graph out a beautiful chart that looks like this. And what do you know? We can see the Pareto principle in action here. That shows that around 80% of the household spending is coming from around 20 to 30% of the categories: housing, transportation, food, and insurance. Oh, and by the way, I'm assuming coffee is in the miscellaneous category unless you consider coffee food, which probably don't because health reasons. Now, here's the thought experiment that will change the way you think about money forever. Let's assume that we're determined to reduce all our expenses across the board, across all categories, by around 10%, assuming it's the same amount of effort to do. And the result is gonna shock you, probably. Hold on, let me crunch some numbers. Do you remember the formula for the quantum physics theory of 4? Right. Oh my God, I've solved it. Okay, I'm back, and the results are actually shocking. For about 80% of the categories here, if we add up the total percent savings, then we found out that we would only get a marginal savings of around 2.6% relative to our total spending. However, if we run the data on the 20% of the categories, the big ones here, the bigger contributors, we would get about a 3 times higher percentage savings of 7.4% relative to the total spending. If that's confusing, here's another way to look at it. If your total expenses for the month is $6,000, similar to the chart, $4,800 or 80% of the expenses is coming from 20% of the categories. And the remaining $1,200 or 20% of the expenses is coming from 80% of the categories. Now, let's assume that you stumbled upon a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Aliens come down from above and offer you the absolute best cheeseburger ever invented throughout the entire universe, and you can eat it for just $600. So obviously you need to save $600 somewhere because, come on man, it's the best cheeseburger ever. It would be much easier to cut $600 from the $4,800 spending instead of the $1,200 spending. Now, to clarify, I'm not saying if you do save money from the 80% of the categories here, that doesn't reduce your overall cost. Sure it does. But what I am trying to say is that it's way more effective and possibly easier to reduce the 20% of the big categories that contribute most of the spending cost. And that's why you can keep buying iced coffee. Mic drop. So ask yourself, are your expenses similar to the average household spending? For housing, can you refinance your mortgage or move to a cheaper place? For transportation, can you trade in for a more affordable car? For food, can you start meal prepping instead of eating out all the time? And for insurance, can you compare rates across different companies and switch to something that costs less? And I know, I just sang high praise for this, but here's a warning, an omen. if you will. For an eagle is in flight, a message from the Greek gods. Sorry, I'm a big Greek mythology nerd. So with this 80-20 formula, it's important that you don't over apply it. There will be times when there is no point in using it because it's just not gonna do any good. Sometimes there are things where we just can't do 20% of the work for 80% of the results. Sometimes you'll need to grind through it and just finish the rest of it because you need to. When I first started my ebook side hustle a long time ago, I had to give 100% of my effort for the first 1 or 2 ebooks because I had no idea what I was doing. I was learning the process and ironing out the kinks so that I could study and learn what is necessary to produce high quality books that people would buy. So I buckled down and did my research and I wrote it, every single page. And once I learned the process, I learned what people really cared about. I adapted to become more effective while still maintaining quality. You won't be able to determine what the 20% is that gets you the 80% unless you do 100% first. No matter what your financial situation is like, just remember, there are only so many minutes in an hour, hours in a day, and days in a week. You are unfortunately limited by the time that you have to do things that help you reach financial freedom, unless you're Dr. Strange, obviously. So take the time to understand and apply the Pareto principle in your life. Instead of being too busy being busy, you should instead be busy doing things that help you reach your goal of financial freedom. Discover the 20% of the effort that brings in 80% of your rewards and focus on it. Or discover the 20% of the things that's costing 80% of your money and time and reduce it. That's the secret formula that many people don't realize. But I'm here to tell you, there's actually another one. And if you thought that this Pareto principle was a really cool concept, just wait until you check out this video on combining stoicism and personal finance, that this truly became invaluable to me on my path to financial freedom.